we've got a major development in a case that could be decided any day now by the Supreme Court. The Trump administration's push to ask about citizenship for the first time ever on the 2020 census. For over a year, the Trump administration has maintained that adding a citizenship question to the U.S. Census was only about better enforcing the Voting Rights Act and protecting minorities, and that the question was added at the written request of the Justice Department. Now, opponents have insisted it will result in an undercount of Hispanics, most of whom do vote Democratic, and that it will result in a way of diminishing the political power of Hispanic voters. And now the ACLU, which is challenging the Trump administration in court, says it has proof that is exactly the administration's goal. And what is the evidence? It's from a dead man's hard drive, believe it or not, and it shows that the idea for the question and the early draft of the Department of Justice's letter was crafted by a Republican operative who is widely considered to be the mastermind at gerrymandering these days. His name is Thomas Hofeller. The evidence was on hard drives found in Hofeller's home shortly after his death last summer, including a study which he conducted, which concludes, quote, adding a citizenship question to the 2020 census would clearly be a disadvantage to the Democrats and advantageous to Republicans and non-Hispanic whites in redistricting. This isn't just speculation. This was in their own words. Hansi Lo Wang is a national correspondent for NPR, and he's covered the fight over the census citizenship question extensively. He joins me now. So, Hansi, explain. Here's my curiosity here. This is already in the hands of the Supreme Court. This evidence of the hard drive, is it being considered? Is this, I mean, what? Does the court already made its decision and this new evidence does nothing? Explain where we are in this process.
I mean, the short answer is we don't know. We're waiting for the court to announce its decision. Its session is currently scheduled to end by the end of June. I'm expecting this to come to the very last day, possibly, maybe the very last day of June. I was expecting that even before these documents came to light. And we're not sure exactly. We know that the ACLU lawyers, as well as the other plaintiffs' attorneys, has informed the Supreme Court that these documents do exist, that they are bringing this to a district judge in Manhattan at the trial court level, and there will be a hearing on Wednesday to go over whether or not the plaintiffs here are alleging that Trump administration officials gave either misleading or lied during their trial testimony, depositions before the trial about the origins of this question. So we'll see exactly if this will play a role in SCOTUS.
All right. So what you're saying is this court fight next week is trying to get standing to do what? To start the trial over?
The issue before this federal judge in New York at the district court level is whether or not this is the allegations of the plaintiff's attorneys here. Did Trump administration officials misrepresent how this question, the citizenship question, how this question came to be, and what were the intentions of the administration in wanting to include this question on forms that will go out to every household in the country for the 2020 census? And so it's a question of whether or not the plaintiff's attorneys are saying, could there be sanctions? Could there be penalties involved here? And could there be additional orders for discovery that would bring about more depositions, more documents? We don't know. It's coming at a time where it's getting very close to the deadline. July 1st is when the Census Bureau says printing has to start for all the paper forms. 1.5 billion pieces of paper, including paper forms, letters, as well as envelopes, have to be printed starting July 1st, the Census Bureau says, as it's currently budgeted and scheduled. And if they don't get printed by then, it really risks the 2020 census. It puts a lot in jeopardy. So
the question that the Supreme Court is deciding, this evidence wasn't there when they heard the arguments about this question. It's possible they've already written the opinion. As we know, the way this, they may have already decided early on which way they were going to go, and they've assigned who's going to write the opinion. Obviously, they were in sort of uncharted waters here. Are the plaintiffs hoping, is the ACLU hoping that somehow the Supreme Court will then just duck? Will they throw it away? Will they just say, you know what, we've got to consider more evidence. We can't rule on this?
I think the ACLU would certainly help whatever, their strategy is. They certainly want to win this case. And for them, it would be for the Supreme Court to say, no, the Trump administration is not allowed to add a citizenship question to the 2020 census. Whether these documents change whatever, possibly a preset opinion of the court, we don't know. We just don't know. It's a black box of the Supreme Court since they have so much discretion. And so I think the thing to watch here is what happens on Wednesday at the District Court in Manhattan, what the judge there, how he handles these claims here, and whether or not additional documents, additional information comes out of any order, if the judge were to give out any orders. I think it's really a wait-and-see period, but it certainly, again, comes at a time where it could really throw things off balance.
You know, Hansi, the argument that the ACLU was making was that it was going to harm Hispanic voters. How did they make that argument at the time? And was their argument, how much more strengthened would their argument have been had they had this evidence?
Well, the plaintiffs say that these documents in which Thomas Hofeller, this major our GOP redistricting strategist, he laid out a conclusion in 2015 in a commission study to say that if you were to have a citizenship question on the census form, and what that means is that you have a data set of who is and who isn't a citizen at a level of detail that we currently do not have, that would produce districts that are advantageous for Republicans and non-white Hispanics. That is what he wrote in this paper. And so the plaintiffs here are arguing that there is a connection between those conclusions and ultimately what the Trump administration wants to do, given that there are, in a separate file that they found in Hofeller's files, a separate document, word for word, a paragraph that explains how to use the Voting Rights Act as a rationale to justify adding a question. And so that's the link that the plaintiffs are arguing that at least indicates that Hofeller plays some role in adding of this question.
It is going to be fascinating to see if the Supreme Court really feels comfortable going through a ruling on this, if they did have a majority to say yes to this question, if they really are going to go through now in the face of this evidence surfacing when it did. Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.